Welcome to Automotive EV and our final session of the day. I'm joined today by Justin Benson, John Willems and Darren Jobling, who are going to share their insights, and we're going to look into new opportunities that there are across the board. So first of all, I will hand you over to Justin and he will have his presentation and go through. He will hand over to John. John will hand over to Darren, and then we'll be back into the group altogether. So, the stage platform, whatever we call these virtual ones now, Justin, is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I think we're finishing with Q&A. So the presentations that we're doing will last about 20 minutes, maybe 25 maximum, with then a real opportunity for you to do some Q&A. I understand that's through the chat space. So any questions you have, do share those. Peter will look through them and feed them in as required, and I will moderate. And we'll have a bit of a conversation, John, Darren, and myself as well, to hopefully develop some thoughts and thinking as we go forward. Well, look, I suspect everyone's had a busy day. It is the end of the day, so let's crack on. I'm going to talk a bit about the electric vehicle marketplace. So I head up Automotive and Mobility at Vendigital. We're working extensively at the moment with electric vehicle manufacturers and auto retailers, two areas which I'm sure you as an audience will understand is under a lot of disruption at the moment, not just from a, if you like, a supply chain perspective, but also from design, development, new products, new marketing, new services. There's an awful lot going on. But electric vehicles seem to be at the centre of things at the moment, and I'll attempt to try and share why I think that's the case. So let's just have a look at not so happy story, I guess, is if we take all drivetrains at the moment, so including petrol and diesel and all the different types of battery type vehicles. So that is supposed to be upside down, because the point is that it's rather oddly, because of COVID, 2019, which is the yellow line, i.e. last year, for the same period, was obviously a much stronger period than that of this year. Simply put, 40% down to the end of August. This is UK numbers. I'll talk about Europe shortly to give you a broader view, but this is about the UK. So not a pretty sight in many ways, but it is coming back. And I'm not sure what you're seeing as an audience, but certainly in my conversations with auto retailers, they are quite, I guess, bullish at the moment. September's looking like it will be a very good month. I don't think we're in any kind of area just at the moment that's suggesting we'll be getting up to last year's levels right now, i.e. this year. But certainly they're very busy, they're selling vehicles, and in fact, in some areas and some models, there's a bit of a supply issue. So on the actual general sales side, it's looking good, at least temporarily. I'll talk a little bit more as to think how things might change in the longer term. But the real plus in all of this, if we look at battery electric vehicles, now this is pure BEVs. You could probably do similar graphs for other electric-based vehicles. But despite COVID, we've seen 150% growth. And as you can see, although I'm jumping a bit from May to August, if you look at the x-axis, the actual growth line is increasing on last year. So it's not just, whereas, you know, if you look at the previous year for all drivetrains, it's running more or less in parallel, if you see what I mean. But in BEV, it's increasing. So remarkably robust for a new product. And it's, you know, in my view, I think a lot of people talk about 2021 being the inflection point. I just wonder, I think, whether we might look at 2020 or the latter half of 2020 post-COVID being an interesting moment where people have continued to buy. So that's as in the UK. If we take a look at Western Europe, this is to July. So I don't quite have August numbers yet, but you'll see that all the markets are doing pretty well. If you particularly look at Germany, France, and the UK, they're almost running in parallel. Probably France and Germany slightly ahead of the UK in there. If you look at the incline of the curve, It is fascinating. You know, these are the sorts of curves we all like to see, COVID or no COVID, and it's looking pretty exciting at the moment. In the sense, if you're making electric vehicles, then I think your challenge is, probably is how you're making money rather than whether or not you can sell them, because I think they're certainly being sold. So that it's just interesting as to how buoyant it is, you know, even despite what's been going on the last 6 months. You know, this is a slide I showed last time, but I thought it was worth revisiting because it does kind of say a number of things about what's happening. And it's interesting that last time I think we were coming out of the lockdown and we were expecting some regional outbreaks and how we was going to do with mitigation. You know, at the time we didn't think there'd be another lockdown, but certainly, you know, there's talk of that, and it's a worry. So how it's going to affect the market. If there is a lockdown, then it's pretty obvious how it's going to affect the market because we've seen it before. But this is the sort of way we could see it going. Even though there's been local lockdowns on a national level, we haven't seen a reduction yet in the sales. But then, of course, we're not into October, November yet. And September, I believe, is a function of a number of things. One is some pent-up demand. I do think people who didn't go on holiday got some spare cash and they think, well, I'll treat myself to a car. And they are spending, and the patterns are changing. But also, I think what we learned from China and America in particular was a real difference in the approach to vehicles. Because a lot of people, particularly in cities, will be interested in moving from place to place using public transport. But there's been a real move to people thinking, well, it's much safer to have my own cab, my own space, my own place. And I think that's driving vehicle sales as well. There are some, what would you call them, clouds on the horizon. You know, certainly anecdotally, generally in conversations I have, a lot of companies in the UK in particular, but I hear it in Europe as well, are thinking about what are their models for the future and how many people do I need, people working from home, you know, looking at efficiencies and productivity and costs in general. They've all had time to do this. So there are concerns over employment or unemployment, I should say, in the UK. And if I draw your attention to the top right hand side there and the potential change to unemployment at the end of the year, there could be a lot more people unemployed than obviously we were thinking at the beginning of the year. Now that has an effect on demand in general, and of course a big expensive good like a vehicle is an important part of that. So you have to get your crystal ball out here, but there is a worry as to how demand is affected, particularly in Q1 next year, as we start to hopefully come out of COVID properly, and companies are starting to organise themselves for the future. Moving on, again, I've shared this before, but there's been some small updates. The issue here is what's driving all of this. So you could look at that curve for battery electric vehicles and think, wow, yeah, that's great, but is it sustainable? Will it continue? And my argument is yes, it will. If you think of the incentives that are being placed at the moment, so France is €7,000, but plus a £5,000 scrappage scheme. So you could get actually €12,000 towards your next electric vehicle if you buy in France. So there's incredible incentive there. Germany is similar, and I think part of the steepness of their curve is down to these incentives. Interestingly, the UK hasn't, but as I've mentioned, the demand has remained robust and increasing in the UK. So the other drivers around that, I think, are some of the things I mentioned earlier around people wanting their own space, but also because of CO2 targets, climate change education, the clean air factor. And of course, EU regulation is driving all the European manufacturers to make emission-free vehicles or much less emission vehicles. So this is all driving. I've put on the top right is a sort of some experienced advisors' views of where we think it could go over the next few years, and then you've got the sort of my views bottom right. I'm a bit more optimistic about this, or bullish, if you will. I think the numbers could be a lot higher, and this year in Western Europe, the new car sales were around 500,000, and that's already up to nearly 600,000. as a forecast for the end of the year, and I think it could be even more. So it's just very interesting now that people are starting to accept this, accept the vehicles, if you like, as a natural alternative to what they've had in the past. This one's a very quick one around production capacity. It's increasing in Germany. I use Germany for obvious reasons. It's where they've got most of the car capacity in Europe, and that's increasing for electric vehicles. It's just gone over 30,000 a month. So, that's a lot compared to where we were even 18 months ago, even though we knew a lot of plans were in place, but it's actually happening. This, again, I've shown before, but it shows the, if you like, the competitive environment. I like this one because it's the old, it's almost like what it must have been like in the 50s and 60s. This is where people are competing for their place in the market, and you can see there's more models coming on board. There's more OEMs competing for the electric vehicle market. So therefore, it's got to bode well for consumers. It's got to bode well for the future of the market as more and more vehicles come onto the market. Finally, just some final thoughts before I go on to John, and this sort of leads into some of the areas we'll be discussing later. But investment in BEV and FEV is historically high. Anybody who's worked in the car manufacturers will have seen it coming down the line, and how much is being spent in the area to choose, if you like, to carve out their part of the market, and it's been increasing. But cost competitiveness is key now. If you imagine the investment in all these electric componentry for electric vehicle, and for the componentry in general for electric vehicle, you wanted to get it right at the begin with, and it wasn't necessarily about cost. It was about getting a high quality product onto the road. Now cost competitiveness is key, so every aspect of the supply chain is being looked at. We're, for example, working on electric motors and have done bomb teardowns of electric motors now, which is taking out huge amounts of cost, because you're starting to realize how you can continue with the right quality, continue with the right performance, while at the same time bringing costs down as you ramp up volumes and ramp up production. It's a really important area going forward, and it's something, if you're into these vehicles at all, it's an area you should be encouraging your colleagues or doing yourselves. There's lots of new entrants, particularly in the commercial vehicle market. Keep an eye out for those, because there's quite a lot in the UK as well as in the rest of Europe, and of course in the rest of the world come to that. But the UK is a real hotbed for commercial vehicles in particular, which is fantastic news for the future. Supply chain in particular is reviewing costs. I mentioned bill of materials, teardowns, and so on, but that leads into how the components are delivered to the assembler or the manufacturer, and then how indeed things are priced then going into the retailers. So it's a real soup to nuts review of the supply chain. One of the areas where I would encourage you to look at is joining up your systems. In other words, how do you look at the insights from your data and combine data together in order to give you insights into the future. And this is, I'm seeing a lot more of this in the retail area as to how they can, two ways really. One is, how do you look at your consumers differently? But secondly, how do you look at your costs differently? And you need to understand what your cost base is really doing. So it's a very interesting area. And finally, agility. Agility is perhaps an overused word these days because of the number of startups that we have in a lot of countries, but in the UK in particular. But learn from others. We're finding learning from startups, learning what agility actually means, learning from other manufacturers, FMCG, as well as other manufacturers in general. There's some real hot tips that you could start to build into your own development and your own manufacturing processes, as well as even taking goods to market. So some interesting, hopefully some interesting thoughts there, just to finish off. And I think, so what are the big messages? One is electric vehicles are here to stay. I believe the growth, this is particularly in Europe, the growth is robust, it's increasing, but the opportunities to do it really well in Europe, and particularly in the UK, are great. If you're in the EV market, carry on doing what you're doing, but let's do it quicker, faster, better, because we've got a great opportunity for the UK to be a big part of this global EV story. And on that note, thank you, everyone. I'll hand over to John, which will probably go into the supply chain in a bit more detail. Okay, John.
Okay, thank you very much, Justin, for this this introduction. Let me first share my screen and get my presentation on. Don't worry, it will not be a long presentation. I'll limit it to three slides only. For those who do not know me, my name is John Willems. I'm responsible for the automotive industry or the strategy in automotive for Fedex Express in Europe. And when you look after strategy in automotive, you cannot ignore the electrical vehicle coming up and the related supply chain challenges with these cars, and particularly the batteries. I think some of you might have seen this presentation a few months back in June when we presented this through one of the automotive EV events. I said I will take only 3 snapshots from that presentation at that time. The presentation is fully available on the e-booth of this conference together with all the material. So please have a look there. And let me know if you have any questions. Why I want to talk about this is I heard it last week in the battery in focus session. Justin brought it just up as well. Costs needs to go down in order to achieve the right volumes, that we get the car being sold more, and that the break-even point is achieved quicker than what we currently have. I think logistics plays an important role there. And what I would like to show here is a few of the challenges that we see from a supply chain perspective, but also share already some positive feedback from customers in dealing with solutions, as there are indeed quite some challenges with the transportation of batteries. What we show what we can do from an integrated perspective is offer door-to-door solutions, and we know lithium-ion, it is not necessarily the most friendly material to carry, but we have the capability to move that by air, given of course that the tight conditions are met from a health and safety perspective, but we do allow the lithium batteries on board of our aircraft, and at this moment into just over 60 countries worldwide. There are countries which you might have expected to be available. We are working there on solutions, but again, we look at it from a door-to-door perspective, and that is a reason to make it easier for the customers, for the shipper, for the receiver, also from a cost perspective. You can imagine for the aftermarket, you don't want to have multiple carriers. You want to ideally have one stop shop with one organization that deliver already to your dealers, and if they can take a battery as well, that would be great. So we think and we believe a door-to-door solution will help reducing the total costs in the supply chain. So we're there to help from on a global scale, but probably more attractive and interesting is moving the batteries by road because of its weight. It is very heavy, and when you fly the material, it becomes expensive. From a European perspective, we cover 45 countries through our network, and 32 of those are DG approved, and DG to the level that we can offer a door-to-door network solution of lithium batteries. And again, to the point, door-to-door, you do benefit as a customer from scale and leverage in a network environment versus a direct vehicle specific solution, or using multiple other carriers to distribute your batteries to a wide range of dealers, or even more important, get them returned when they break down. This slide gives an overview of capabilities that we have at various stages of the supply chain, at various battery weights, battery conditions, or from a geographical scope. I want to highlight a few elements here. When we talk about R&D and prototype business of lithium batteries, you often talk about small series productions or non-tested batteries with compliance to A88 regulation. When you as a shipper are compliant, when you have that approval, then we do accept these batteries in our networks. Inbound to production, yes, we do support it, but the majority will be large volumes, so that will move more on the full truckload or sea freight mode. However, if there is an emergency shipment, it can be handled. Aftermarket is maybe the biggest interest, and that is where we have seen substantial opportunities. We have been successful. As I mentioned earlier, the dealers are happy to receive the goods from the same carrier that bring their normal parts already daily. And if we can take then the batteries with that, absolutely much appreciated. Returns comes with some more challenges. That's why I've mentioned here in blue that we have a door-to-door capability there. When you see something in gray, it doesn't mean it is not available. We can handle it, but we might need specific solutions there, often from at the first mile or last mile end, or from a compliance perspective. Brings me back to returns. When a battery is used, it is fine to return. When it is defective, it has to be declared if it is safe for transport, yes or no. On average, the car dealers are not a specialist to determine if a battery is safe for transport, yes or no. We can help there in that process. Hence, and that process is very important to ensure that we have a health and safety compliant transport process. So what we have seen with the organization where we carry now the batteries for that, taking that element out of their hands, make sure that the right packaging material is delivered to the dealer, the paperwork is correct in place, and the safety declaration is there, then we're able to pick up the goods and handle the returns. Depending on the battery weight, there is a full door-to-door solution possible, or a specific solution required. We know we can move by air without a problem when the battery is below 35 kilogram, but when it hits 35 kilogram more, then it requires additional approval. And sorry for my phone, that's out now. But it still can be moved on the network, by road as well. It does mark here over 330 kilogram gray. What does it mean? A large operation as we operate with the pickup and delivery fleets. You need to have, when a vehicle carries more than 1,000 points of dangerous goods, it needs to be completely fully ADR compliant, and that is not always the case with pickup and delivery fleets. Hence, we look at solutions there when that occurs. Why 330 kilogram? 1 kilogram of net lithium-ion battery weight equals 3 dangerous goods points. Hence, with a battery over 330 kilogram, you hit immediately the maximum of what is allowed on a car that is not ADR equipped. As mentioned earlier, battery condition is important to be able to ship it, but we do have solutions. What we do not touch from an integrated perspective is batteries declared waste or recycling. Customers often know this, and when we discuss that, domestic solutions are looked into by the customer for that. If we will do that in the future, that is a question, but for the moment, this stays out of the scope. Origin destinations, yeah, we have the capabilities I showed already on a domestic, European or intercontinental. And transport modes, as one of the biggest airlines, or the biggest airline in the world, we love to fly material. But I can imagine, coming back on what is mentioned, we need to keep the costs in control. I think we have cost-effective and commercial viable solutions in place to transport lithium batteries by road. And if it doesn't meet the specific requirement, or if it doesn't meet the standard network solution, the requirements, there is an opportunity for a special solution, often first or last mile related. I hope to have given here a little bit of insight of how an integrator, a logistics service provider can support this new business. We're starting the future. We need to support this for the future. We have seen the growth numbers. Electrical vehicles kept on growing through COVID. So we are in. We will follow this business and happy to keep you updated going forward. I'd like to hand over now to Darren.
I'm sorry, no, thank you, John, very much. Darren, I think we're over to you now.
Yes, good afternoon.
The other side of the supply chain.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here talking to you. I'll just share my screen, and with a bit of luck, you should see the beautiful Lucid Air. Obviously, brand new Californian EV launched just over, I think 9th of September, California Day is when it went live. Massive success. And the reason we're talking to you today is really that Zerolite was an intrinsic part of that launch. And I think we're part of the revolution that's happening in automotive sales and marketing generally. But I think specifically the fastest movers currently are in the world of EVs. Now, I'm very unusual in that my background is in computer games, and actually the DNA of Zerolite as a company is in computer games. But if you think about computer games, all they are is a really engaging customer experience. And we see no reason why, obviously a car is a large investment for a lot of people. You know, if you can get people engaged online, that is really the key to longer term success. So as I say, Zerolite are cloud-based visualization specialists, which means that everything we do comes from the cloud, so it can be available digitally globally. So literally we can deliver any vehicle in any configuration within 5 seconds, no matter where you are in the world, including China. And we're fundamentally using that to give great vehicle shopping experiences. So when you're in the market, what can we do as Zerolite to help you buy a car? And really the auto manufacturers have got a really big problem. And what's happened is you get this explosion of digital needs. So you see exactly the same Audi vehicle here provided by Zerolite in all of these different use cases. But the problem is that you've got is that you can no longer serve these the traditional manner. They have to be served via the cloud quickly and at scale. And that's really one of the problems the auto manufacturers have. But at the same time, the budgets to do this sort of stuff are actually at best staying static. And in most cases, they're going down. So really what you need to do is to think about how can you provide this better, cheaper, faster, all of these digital needs. And the way that we do it is we have 2 main things that we offer. On the left-hand side is configurators, which is how you spec up your car. And that's what we did for the Lucid Air 2 weeks ago. And then on the right-hand side, what we have is a content production system. So we say this is democratization of the digital twin. So you as a dealer, as a territory, as an agency, as the OEM themselves, you put your car up in the cloud, and then the sort of things that you would normally pay a lot of money for at an agency, such as images of stock vehicles, adverts, all that sort of thing, can all be served via the cloud from the same single source of truth. So who do we do this for? We've seen an acceleration over the last 12 months, where fundamentally we've nearly tripled the number of car manufacturers on global rollout. So there's a real understanding that the current battleground is online. And what we say is fundamentally a consumer mentally buys a car online. They just go to a dealer now to press the buy it now button and get the deal done. And that's why I think a decade ago, the average person went 7 times into a dealership before they bought a car. Now it's down to about 1.6. And really what we're talking about today is, this is a very recent bit of research, I think in August from Google, looking at the effects of COVID-19. And what fundamentally we've seen is you've had 5 years of digital evolution has been compressed down to 12 months of digital revolution. And currently with the car manufacturers, there's no bigger, well, it's one of the biggest things that they're thinking about currently is how to get those vehicles into the hands of the consumers. So pretty much we can't help with the top 2, but where Zero Light helps people is people want the dealer experience closer to home or at home, ideally. Obviously, they're interested in online car buying and getting the car delivered to their door. And then more and more, which is what we did with Lucid on the Lucid Air, is you can no longer have these events where you launch a car. How in the post-COVID world can somebody understand what your vehicle is capable of and what it's offering? And the prize is big. This is literally this month's research from Frost & Sullivan, who says that online vehicle sales and aftermarket are expected to grow to 605 billion by 2025. So there's lots to go at. And last slide is obviously we also work with the mass market manufacturers. Here's Volkswagen and the very, very beautiful ID3. And that's it from me in terms of an introduction anyway.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Interesting. I think we're getting a sight of the market and understanding the supply chain and understanding the retail experience there and how it can change with different products. And I'm certainly seeing electric vehicles really changing the way in which the retail, if you like, the retail environment is thinking about how they move the car from the manufacturer to a customer, an ultimate customer. And it's very interesting both in passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles as well. It's because it's somewhat different in those 2 areas, but equally fascinating. Peter, any questions coming in? Oh, you're on mute. Yeah. Peter, you're on mute, Peter. Oh, are you on mute?
Thank you, I'm back. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
I do that just in case the dog's barking or snoring loudly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so anyway. When we look at the UK figures, how imperative, which I believe it is that we have more battery facilities like British Volt are doing?
Well, the British Volt initiative looks very exciting, but in a straightforward answer to the question is it is imperative. It's hugely important to the success of the future automotive industry in the UK. We are excellent at making internal combustion engine based vehicles, and we have great engineers. There are certain products. The automotive market is a global business. So the fact that the UK is the base for a number of the global auto manufacturers for certain models, whether it be passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles, there are some notable examples. I mean, the Transit, for example, it's globally managed from here. So all the development, everything about that vehicle is done from here. It's a world-class product. And as you'll be aware, Ford developing electric versions of that. And at the moment, that's all based here. Similarly, with some other models, I mean, Jaguar Land Rover is well known, and they're developing electric vehicles of their own. So in order to be able to have a supply chain that is based in the UK, fundamentally based on batteries, i.e. a gigafactory based in the UK, is fundamental to the success of the auto industry in the UK. And if you look at what Germany and France are doing, the big three, if I could say big 2 plus 1, but we punch above our weight, Peter. I've said this before, but Germany are building them, France are building them, and I think that we've got to build them to stay competitive and continue to be able to build the great products that we can do in the UK. But I genuinely feel it's coming. It's coming at a hell of a pace, particularly from an automotive perspective. And you can understand how difficult it is for the OEMs to really manage the pace of change. But I think the government, notwithstanding whatever you might think about it, but certainly at the coalface, they're very keen in order to support battery manufacture and the battery supply chain. And if you look at our supply chain from chemicals, so we actually have some pretty good setups right across the country. It just needs to be better integrated. But I think if we can build gigafactories, better integrate the supply chain, the UK could be a world beater again.
Should a vehicle's footprint be also measured across the entire chain?
That's a really good question. I in my view, agree. I think it's yes, definitely. There are elements of the supply chain which do use fossil fuels. So you are making batteries which have zero emissions. So you've got zero tailpipe emissions. But what were the emissions that were created to create the electric vehicle in the first place? And it's quite controversial because, depending on where you read and which data you look at and everything else, you could have quite a heated debate and argument about it. But it is absolutely something that the OEMs are cognizant of. They are dealing with it. They're trying to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels in the supply chain. I think John might actually have a view on this in the sense of the kind of vehicles I suspect that he'll be managing in the future compared to what he's doing now, and the sorts of equipment that he's moving around. So it's you're right. It's something we have to be careful of. One of the things that is really driving it is the politicians' need for cleaner air in cities and towns, because politicians, particularly mayors and the local government, they want to have better conditions for their citizens in local cities. So and that's what's driving the zero tailpipe emissions. But I couldn't agree more. You've got to keep an eye on your entire supply chain and make sure that it is, if it's not comparable, that it is reducing regularly year on year as we move forward with this technology. But I generally believe we are. The opportunities for applying clean energy to the way the supply chain manufactures and delivers and creates and moves the equipment through to create the final product is improving all the time.
Are you finding, John, that you're getting greater pressure on that from vehicle manufacturers?
Yes. What you see obviously is manufacturers want to have produce the cars CO2 neutral and offset some of the CO2, but where we can help is of course with smart logistics solutions. Coming back on the point what Justin just made, I've not done it for EVs yet, but I recall a case with a customer in the past for emergency production material where an air solution was used for a 3 to 4 day emergency occasion in Europe. I said, let us look in how we can use a reliable road transportation solution for that. It was not massive big shipment, but 500,000 kilograms. The result was a 95% less CO2 emission on the same amount shipped. So therefore, I think for the future, that is absolutely important and that needs to be considered in the total CO2 emission of the production of an electrical vehicle. And I think also, and I'm not sure if that comes up, but I'm also interested and understand how the future aftermarket supply chain will look like of electrical vehicles. If We do hear already. We do know, of course, there are less parts in an in an electrical vehicle, and it will need less maintenance. But the first signals are there about, do you really need to bring your car to, maybe with an electrical vehicle, we send an engineer to you, and you as a logistics provider, you deliver the part directly to the location where the car is, or to the field, to the engineer. That are also changes that are happening.
I want to come across at the moment to sort of vehicle purchasing in general.
Yeah.
If we're looking at sort of genuinely have a greater interest to buy online, because we're doing everything online, what impact with your experience on designing it will that have on how you approach the aftermarket?
Yeah, I think what's very important is that pretty much people now demand a personalised buying experience. You know, if we were to walk in, I'm based in Newcastle upon Tyne. If we were to walk into a jeweler this afternoon and said, "Hey, I'd like to buy a £25,000 watch," we'd be treated like stars. If I went into a local dealer, I want to buy a £25,000 car, the experience would be certainly somewhat different. So what happened is everybody now wants the Amazon experience. In the world of digital, you judge whatever your experience sort of has been on any platform, how it compares to, say, somebody like an Amazon. And each and every one of us has a different Amazon homepage that's tailored towards us. So if I'm interested in buying a high value vehicle, you know, I would expect that the car manufacturer should provide me with a tailored, almost a concierge style experience. Now, I think one of the reasons that, or where the OEM and the dealer can play a very, very big role is in the expertise that they have to guide a person through the actual buying experience. And I think a lot of that is largely overlooked. People think that you just have to add a buy it now button to a website and people will buy your vehicle. In actual fact, you need to provide reassurance, you know, are these all the right options, etc. But I think once you've actually bought the car and looking at aftermarket, there's certainly what should happen is, say if a OEM introduces, say, something like a new accessory, when they tell you about that, this accessory, you should see imagery or videos of the accessory fitted to your car in your specification. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to see more and more of. You're going to go online, you're going to say configure a vehicle in a configurator and maybe fit child seats, fit cycle racks, etc. And then the next time you see an advert from an automotive OEM, it'll not be a generic car that you see. The car that you see in the advert will be the car that you left behind the configurator with all of the upgrades and everything fitting to it.
And Peter, I think that, Darren, just to add to what you said, I think it applies to services as well. Because I think the services at the moment is very transactional from a retailer and from an OEM. Whereas what I'm starting to see is that the OEM, if you like, the national sales companies and the retailers want to see a longer term relationship with the consumer, more of a continuous relationship rather than a transactional one, because they might sort of interact with them once a year, post the vehicle. So you sell the vehicle, then interact in a year's time or so if you have a service. But what about those 11 months in between, and how can you increase that that interaction in a way that either gets them to buy another vehicle or gets them to buy lots of other services that you're now going to buy through a motor company, perhaps, rather than somewhere else. Again, going back to the Amazon experience, because a lot of this can be about the trusted brand. And if you have a trusted brand, how can you leverage that in your marketplace? So you take Amazon, you know, they'll sell almost anything. You can buy almost pretty much everything, can't you, now on the website? But I think there's still a place for trusted brands to start to expand their services in a way that augments their products and augments the way they do things now.
And I think one of the real dangers or opportunities, depending on which way you look at it, is that people are demanding that level of customer journey and that level of personalized experience, as well as the OEMs looking to go online. You've also got the big platforms looking to step in, and then there's obvious things as well happen with Amazon Automotive, etc. So that's what happens in a period of transition, is that in disruption, is that in the hiatus, other players come in who maybe don't have any of the baggage or the dogma or the existed systems that they've got, and can bring in something totally different.
Do you not see, though, that if the buying trend is going more online, the interaction between a dealer is going to get smaller and smaller? Because why does an OEM ship to a dealer if its carrier could deliver it directly to the customer?
Yeah, so I think one of the major problems, and it's not my area of expertise, but one of the major problems when you speak to the OEMs is that the actual dealer networks themselves fill a very, very important logistics function. And that's one of the things that does need to be, and it's something not to be underestimated, as we saw with Tesla.
Absolutely.
So it is literally, I think the dealers are very much, the value that they bring is underplayed, you know, and in terms of that interface. So I think you have to be very careful to say, hey, yes, we're all going to sell online, because it could open up a whole world of hurt.
Yeah, if you think of it as a channel to market, isn't it, Darren? I think if you look at the online tools that you can have these days as a channel to market, the dealer is still a channel to market, and there are other ways, car supermarkets, direct to door, and everything else. Those are all, so if you like, channels to market. I remember when the internet came in, and talking to senior execs in the internet world, the people who were using the internet service providers started to see it as another channel. So cinemas thought they were going to close because everything would be done online, but it's a different experience, and it caters to different markets. And I think that's one point. I mean, Darren, I suspect you've been involved in this as well. But what I'm finding is that the retailers in particular start to look at their consumers differently, and what is the kind of experience they want. And if they want an online experience, fine. So how do I provide that? But a lot of them will want a touchy-feely dealer type of experience. How do I cater for that as well? And it's that kind of breakdown, and segmenting your market in a number of different ways, and really knowing your consumer, which is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happens is that the OEMs need to significantly step up their game in terms of the data that they hold about or understand about the people that are, say, doing things like visiting their website. So coming from the games industry is something like Candy Crush, the mobile phone game. They're looking to monetize you for $2.99. So, and what happens is they're looking at everything that you're doing in that product all the time in an effort to monetize you for $2.99. Unbelievably, in the average auto manufacturer, the internet and the website is pretty much a black box. So for somebody like a Zero-Light customer, we track the behavior of that person 10 times every second and use that to match it against other people who behaved like that. And I think that's the key. It's great to have great looking visuals at the front, but it's the data that's the knowledge that's underneath it, just behavioral data.
What I experience already from my dealer, and I'm still driving an internal combustion engine, but sorry, but I receive these days much more emails, information from my dealer about events happening where they are involved in. And when you look at the warranty terms, 10 years ago it was a year, and now you get easily 3 years, 5 years, 7 years warranty terms on an internal combustion engine. What will that be with the future electrical vehicles? 10-year warranty, link you for 10 years to a repair service location of a OEM, and feed you with information, track your behavior, use AI technology to satisfy you and build up that experience.
Yeah, you're pretty much going to get that continuous. So we have a connected customer journey. So most OEMs, traditional OEMs, is very difficult for them to adopt a new customer journey because they're set up as siloed units. So the people who do print the brochures is different from the people that do the dealership experiences, different from the people that do the website. A new manufacturer like a Lucid is starting from first principles, so they instantly can put in a connected customer journey right out of the gate. So the traditional OEMs have got to break a few eggs in the process, and I think that's why you're seeing in terms of EVs, they're trying, off the back of COVID, is carve out a different customer journey for their EV customers.
Any other thoughts on that topic before we move on a bit? Or no? Plug-in hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the UK, the incentives to get a plug-in hybrid have disappeared, really.
Yeah.
But that, I understand, is because that lots of the plug-in hybrids, their cables to plug in have actually never been taken out of the wrapper because the vehicle was bought for the incentive, but actually don't plug in at all. How do we work incentives out if it's not going to actually be what the aim of the incentive was for?
Yeah, and they're selling pretty well anyway, because they solve a perceived problem at the moment that I don't have the range. I've got an engine on my vehicle, then I can quickly charge my battery. But they're supposed to be designed to be plug-in, i.e., you plug them in to charge them up, then you use that before you need to use the engine. And what you're referring to, I think, Peter, is the fact that usually happens for 2 or 3 weeks, and then people just think, I'll forget it, I'll just keep using the engine that's in the car. And you still get pretty good emission. You can still do pretty well, but it's not stellar. It's not that much higher than what you can get from a reasonable just having an ICE vehicle. And one of the things that worries me about plug-in hybrids is that they're quite heavy and they're quite expensive to make, and you can't necessarily sell them for much more than you would a normal internal combustion engine vehicle. So there's a real balance that the OEMs are trying to grapple with here, and it's an important step, but I think it's a step that will happen quicker than people think, because the battery technology is moving on so fast, and and genuinely the usage. People now are almost buying their vehicles based on usage rather than just having another car. So, for example, okay, you might have a family car, but if you're just using a car for taking the kids to school or going for the grocery run or what have you, I've got a friend who's got a second-hand Zoe. They use it for all those things locally, and then whenever the mum or dad want to do a longer journey to go to for work or for whatever else, they pop themselves into the internal combustion engine parked right next to it. So the behaviours of, it's a little bit what Darren was saying, the behaviours of consumers is changing, the way they're thinking about it. And I come back to what's driving this. And in the case of at least, and I take the question on board about the supply chain emissions just as important as the tailpipe emissions. But so far as families are concerned, they're incredibly well educated about climate change. So the move and the pressure towards moving to zero tailpipe emissions is so high, particularly from your 11 or 12-year-old daughter or son, particularly from if you don't feel it as a parent, your kids are telling you it when they come back from school, and that pressure at the moment is huge towards. And when you say, I've still got an internal combustion engine in the vehicle, son or daughter, they're saying, why have you done that, Dad? If you have a battery electric vehicle, you can plug it in. And the big difference, people, please perhaps sound like a cracked record with this, but remember, you can fill up your electric vehicle at home. Now, you can't do that with a petrol, with internal combustion engine. And the fact you can do it at home, if you think about the way, just your behaviors and the way you use a vehicle, that becomes a huge difference in the way that you use that vehicle and you keep it charged up and the way that you can get around. And that's important when you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle right now. Are there enough charge points? Have I got enough ability to get around and everything else? What's my usage of that vehicle? And I think this is going back to connected vehicles. This is where the connected vehicle piece and the connected experience is going to be so important, because when people go and buy electric vehicles, because they're connected, when they're saying, oh, I don't want an electric vehicle because of my usage is going to be different to an internal combustion engine, you're having some dealers are saying, oh, no, it's not. You know, your usage is very similar, because the car you bought off us last time, we've been monitoring for the last 3 years. An electric vehicle you could use in that, absolutely no problem. Of course, it depends on whether the dealer wants to sell you an electric vehicle in the first place, I guess. But those sorts of feedback loops and those kind of circular arguments are starting to happen more and more often. And you just see the numbers. I'm just amazed at how well, I'm talking purely battery electric vehicles. So we don't have the infrastructure is the thing I hear a lot about. You know, they're expensive, they're this, they're that, but that is starting to balance out. And you can see it in the numbers, because when people are going out there, there's a lot of cars being sold. If you combine battery electric vehicles with plug-in hybrids, Peter, it was 10% of the market in August. Yep. In the UK, 10%, and it was less than 2%, I think, 18 months ago. So, sorry, battery electric vehicles less than 2% 18 months ago. But it's you know, it's coming, and it's people are really considering it as a purchase for themselves now.
You mentioned that it's easy for charge, but there's a tremendous amount of properties where you can't charge at home.
True. Yes, there is. That's a really good point. It's about 60-40, but 40% of the homes in the country can. 40% have drives, 60% don't. And I think that's where the infrastructure issue needs to come in. I mean, you do have these bizarre situations where someone buys an extension lead and they're doing it from the third floor flat, you know, to charge their electric vehicle. And in some ways that's fine. But you're right. I think that's where you get the right you need to get the right balance and thinking around infrastructure, so that you have the infrastructure in the right places. Because certainly for areas where people do have their own drive or their own parking area, which is close to very close to their home, if you like, off-street parking, for want of a better phrase, there is still 40% of the market there. So, you know, it's a big change. If you say to anybody, I can change the market by 40 or 50%, that's still very, very disruptive.
And how do you think the traditional, that amount of change in big automotive companies, I mean, how do you think realistically they're going to cope with it? Because it's a lot of change in a small amount of time to the industry that's generally perceived as being slow moving.
Yeah. Well, by definition, because of the development of the product, it's a relatively slow-moving industry, because to get the product right and meet the regulations and health and safety and everything else. But and they're fantastic products in many respects, the engineering that goes into them. But you're right, now you've got this new product coming in, and people who take Tesla, classic example, start from a blank sheet of paper. They can make the vehicle, and all of a sudden they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars, when they're making about a tenth of the vehicles that, say, a Ford make around the world. And it's that future opportunity. I think where the incumbents, you know, in this kind of market, it's like anything. You start from a slight disadvantage, because you've invested billions of dollars in say diesel or petrol technology, and you want your return from that, and you're trying to manage the transition to electric. But make no mistake, all the OEMs are investing huge sums in electric, but also the whole mobility experience, in the sense of how people are changing the way they choose to get around the world or get around, you know, their local areas and so on. And there is huge investments there, and I wouldn't write them off at all. I know some investors have, if you look at the stock market and what have you. But genuinely, I think there's an awful lot going on. The amount of investment is just too huge, and they're balancing out whether they do that inside the company. It comes back to my agility point. If you're going to change an existing process, is that going to take you longer than setting up a separate agile company that, like a startup? So should you set up your own Tesla 2 or Ford electric 2? And if you take Ford by way of example, they've developed the Mustang version. What's it called? The Mach-E. The Mach-E. They've developed that somewhat separately. I wouldn't say I have to be careful about the wording they use, but it's had its own development train. It's got its own manufacturing facility. It's got its own supply chain, and they've created, I think, a world-class. My humble opinion, personal opinion, it's a world-class product, electric vehicle. I mean, you're selling bobbins in the UK, and they're only making, compared to the big scheme of things, they're only making a few tens of thousands at the moment. But that's where Tesla were a few years back. So don't write off the OEMs. They're doing some great things and investing heavily in the new world. Grant you, they've got new competition now, and there's a lot of new startups. But some well-funded, others than others. You may have seen in the papers another electric company having a few problems the last couple of days. But you go back to 1910s, 1920s. This is exactly what was happening in the internal combustion engine market in those days. There was 50, 100 car manufacturers, and now we're down to it's 27 outside of China. So I think you're going to see that happen. Lots of these will grow up, and then they'll start to mature, and there'll be consolidation in the future.
Yeah, I definitely think the response from the traditional OEMs has been impressive. I think generally, considering how well established they are.
Yes. Yeah.
And how difficult it is for them to actually just turn the tap the different way.
Yeah. Considering all the other pressures on them. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. We've actually overrun.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's not your fault. It's probably me. So, any other questions you have together, or any other points that you actually wanted to try to raise?
Not from my end, I don't think so. I've enjoyed it. It's been an interesting and informative discussion.
My only headline, Peter, is if you're not looking at your cost base and thinking about improving productivity, driving down costs at the moment, your competitors are. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your cost of operations. There's some real opportunities here that something like COVID has probably brought up to the surface that hadn't been noticed before. So there's a real opportunity there to come out of this, leaner and faster and better.
From your perspective, John?
Yeah, I think the supply chain is important. That we do not only look at the car itself from a CO2 emission, but from a total supply chain perspective, and how can all the elements help in there, including transportation. Also, what I mentioned earlier, and Darren used the word cloud. Will the repair go through the cloud in the future? And we see a brand updating their cars already overnight through the cloud. So there's a lot of change to happen.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, they're becoming iPhones on wheels, is what we see.
Yeah.
So the battery life's going to be pretty poor then. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone who's viewed have. It obviously will be on catch up now and ongoingly, so it won't go. If you get chance, come back again and have a look at some of the other sessions that are being done. And sort of pick the brains, and when you come in next time, have a look at some of our sponsor booths, and they are full of knowledge, and they've got plenty of download material that's useful. And we will keep watching you at Zero Light, because the Lucid is a pretty awesome looking car to start with.
It's a pretty impressive piece of kit.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Ed. Bye bye.
Bye bye.